So we're looking at the laws of the borrower. And just to summarize in 20 seconds, the last 2 weeks is that in general, the law with the borrower is that no matter what happens, the borrower has to pay. And the reason for that is because the borrower gets all the benefit. The lender doesn't get any benefit. It's not like a renter where it's not like the person renting where he'll get money. The owner will get money. So the owner receives no benefit at all. Since it receives no benefit at all, the borrower gets all the benefits. So therefore, the borrower gets all the liability. No matter what happens, if it was in the person's control or not in the person's control, the borrower is always liable to pay. That was the principle. And last week we spoke about the exception. We spoke about the parameters of the exception. The exception is if I borrow something from you for a specific purpose, let's say I borrow an ox to plow a field, and it dies or breaks while I am doing exactly what I said I would do, I'm not liable. Called meta machmat malacha. It died, but it died because of the work. Why that would be, what we discussed last week, I'm not going to repeat it. But that's the principle. The principle, if it died while it was working, is the only case where the borrower is not liable. Okay, so that's the 2 principles. Number 1, borrower is always liable. Number 2, exception. If the animal dies or the vessel breaks, the hammer breaks while I'm working I'm doing exactly what I told the owner I'm going to do, then I'm not liable. Okay, fine. Now the question becomes we get into specifics about the detail, about the exception. Now that we're going to think about this week, at least the beginning, the first thing we're going to address, the next section in Maimonides, is how do I prove that it died while I was working? So I'm the borrower. I borrowed your hammer. I claim I was chopping wood. I claim the axe broke while I was chopping wood. So do you take my word for it or not? So the conventional interpretation would be, usually we say, all the shomrim, all the guardians, the paid guardian, the unpaid guardian, the borrower and the renter, the Torah says that in the cases, if they have to pay, they have to pay. But if they don't have to pay, the Torah says, Shvuat Hashem, there should be the oath of God between the two. So in other words, usually the law would be that if I claim that something happened and therefore I'm not liable, I take an oath. That's what the Torah says. You'll see in this section where the Talmud is going to make a little bit of an exception. So the first thing I want to do is I want to show the verse. So I'm going to share the screen. And here I have Maimonides, but here I have the verse. So this is just an example because this is talking about a paid guardian. So it's not exactly the case of a borrower, but that's not that significant right now. The law is going to say the same. In other words, here's a case where the borrower claims, where the guardian claims they're not liable, something happened beyond their control, and they don't have to pay. So what does the Torah say? So I'm looking at verse 9. If a man gives his neighbor a donkey, a bull, a lamb, or any animal for safekeeping, and it dies, breaks the limb, or is captured, and no fees. Okay, so no one sees. So what do we do? Verse 10, the oath of the Lord shall be between the 2 of them, provided, meaning to take the oath that he did not lay his hand upon his neighbor's property, and its owner shall accept it, and he shall not pay. In other words, key beginning of verse 10, the oath of the Lord shall be between the 2 of them. So if I'm the guardian and I claim something happened that makes me not liable, I take an oath. Okay. So now let's try to apply it to our case. So in our case, I borrowed your ox. I come and I say that I borrowed your ox. It died while it was doing the work. and I say I'm not guilty because it's Meta Machmat Balacha. It died while I was doing the work. So you, the owner, you say, prove it to me. I don't know. I don't know if I believe you that it died while doing the work. Maybe it just died at night. Who said it died while it was doing the work? So you would think that the law would be that a person would have to just take an oath, because that's what the verse says. But you'll see in a minute that it's not so simple. So for that, I could read it in Maimonides, but instead we'll read it in the Talmud, because in the Talmud it's in the story form. And after we do the story form, we'll do it in Maimonides, because it's always good to tell a story. Why not, right? Nobody ever complained that there are too many stories. Okay, so I'm going to share the screen once again. We're going to go to Talmud Tractate Bava Metzia. Here we go. Ahu Gabra, the Gemara relates, there was a certain man who transported a barrel of wine in the market. In Aramaic, it's beristeka. Risteka is a market of Mechoza. Mechoza is one of the famous cities in Babylonia, where a lot of the stories, naturally, a lot of the stories of the Talmud take place, because the Talmud was written in Babylonia. There were different Babylonian cities, Sura, Naharda, Pumbedita, Mechoza. These are the cities. So this story happened in the marketplace of Mechoza. So what happened? So the person was carrying a barrel of wine in the market for his friend in Mechoza, and broke it on one of the protrusions of a wall in Mechoza. So in that case, you would expect that he would have to take an oath, right? If you claim, if the owner claims that he doesn't believe him that it broke in a way that he wouldn't be liable, you would think he would have to take an oath. But what happens was the case came before Rava, one of the most famous Talmudic sages, who said to him, with regard to Mechoza, to the market of Mechoza, people are generally found there. Go and bring evidence in your favor, and you will be exempt. So this is a very interesting thing that Rava said. Rava said that if you claim that this accident happened in a place that we know is a very busy place, busy with pedestrians, then you can't just take an oath and say, I promise it broke in a way that I did nothing wrong. If it's a place where we expect people to be, you have to go and you have to bring evidence, bring witnesses that what you said is true. And if you cannot bring the witnesses that what you said is true, you would have to pay. So in our case, if I claim that I borrowed your axe, not ox, but axe, to chop down a tree in front on Greenwich Avenue, and while I was chopping, the axe broke. Okay, so if I say I borrowed it and I'm doing it in Greenwich Avenue, you say Greenwich Avenue, there are people on Greenwich Avenue. You can't just take an oath that it broke while you were doing the work. You would have to bring witnesses. Now, where do you see that? The verse just said take an oath. Rava comes and Rava says, oh, if it happened in a marketplace of Mechoza, then an oath is not enough, then you have to bring witnesses. So the students asked him, his colleagues, Rav Yosef asked him, where do you get this opinion from? Who are you following? Rav Yosef, Rava's son, sent him, in accordance with whose opinion did you issue this ruling? In accordance with the opinion of Isi ben Yehuda, Rava said to him, yes, I ruled in accordance with the ruling of Isi, and we hold in accordance with his opinion. Who's Isi ben Yehuda, and what did Isi ben Yehuda say? So we have to scroll up a little bit. And Isi, again, a name of a sage, said the following. And he quoted the verse that we just read earlier. So let's read Isi, because it's very nice how he reads the verse. Because again, you read the verse says you have to take an oath. How do you get to the point? Oh, you have to take an oath if there's no witnesses. But if there's a place where you expect to be witnesses, then you have to bring witnesses. And if you cannot bring witnesses that it died while you were doing the work, you would have to pay. So what does Isi do? Isi is very brilliant. Here's Isi. As it is taught in a Baraita, Isi ben Yehuda says, with regard to the verse, and it died or was hurt or driven away without an eyewitness, an oath of the Lord shall be between them. Exodus 22:9. That's exactly what we said earlier. The translated a little bit different, but it's the same verse. One can infer from there that if there is an eyewitness, let him bring evidence and not be exempt. Okay, so let's go back to the verse. What does the verse say? Verse 10, verse 9 and 10. The oath of the Lord, right, let's go to the end of 9. So if a man gives his neighbor a donkey, a bull, a lamb, or any animal for safekeeping, and it dies, breaks a limb, or is captured, and no one sees it, the oath of the Lord shall be between the two of them. So it sounds like you have to take an oath. Isi says, no, you have to take an oath. What does it say at the end of verse 9? If no one sees it. But in a place of the marketplace of Machoza, if it's a place that you would expect people to see it, then the oath doesn't work. Then you would actually have to bring witnesses. And if you can't bring witnesses, the borrower is liable to pay. Okay, so you see. So that's the first point. That's the journey. Just to repeat this very quickly before we read in Maimonides, the starting point is we assume that. The starting point is that we assume that if the borrower says, look, I borrowed your object or your animal and it broke while I was doing work, the starting point is we assume he just has to take an oath and we believe him. But here, Maimonides, based on Rava, based on Isi ben Yehuda, the 3 sages, he says, no. When do we say you take an oath? That if it's a place where there is no people are not expected to be there. But if you do expect people to be there, if it's a place that we expect people to be, the borrower cannot be exempt from paying unless he could bring witnesses that it happened in a place that it broke while he was doing the work. Does that make sense? But read it inside. So let's read it in Maimonides. It's going to be a little repetitive, but that's what we do. Maimonides, number 3. No, number 2. The following rules apply when a person borrows an animal from a colleague. It dies. And the borrower claims that it died while in the midst of work. And we know, what does that mean? The implication is if it died while in the midst of work, then the borrower doesn't have to pay. If he borrowed it to travel to a place where people are commonly present, right? I borrowed your donkey, and I say I'm borrowing your donkey because I need to drive from Mason Street to the bottom of Greenwich Avenue. Okay, so there's people present. So if he borrowed it to travel to a place where people are commonly present, he must bring witnesses who testify that it died or it was destroyed by forces beyond his control while he was working with it or riding it. That's the only case the borrower is exempt, if it died or broke while he was using it for the exact purpose that he borrowed it for. But but the bottom line is I have to bring witnesses that it died or broke while I was doing that. He is then free with it, and he did not deviate from his original requests. He is then freed of liability. If he does not bring proof, he is liable. Different rules apply when a person borrows an animal to fill up the earth in his ruin. In other words, I'm going to my ruin. In other words, I want to do a construction on my house. Nobody is there, private property. So I borrow my animal to fill the earth, to make the flatten the earth or whatever I'm doing at my construction sites, i.e. a place where it is not common for witnesses to be present. Or he borrowed a bucket to fill his cistern in his house. In other words, there are no witnesses in my house. And the bucket was destroyed in the cistern. If he brings proof that the animal or the object was destroyed in the process of performing the task for which it was borrowed, he is not liable even to take an oath. If he cannot bring proof, he must take an oath required of the watchman and that the animal died during the performance of the task for which it was borrowed. Similar laws applies in all analogous situations. So what Maimonides is saying here, which is not written explicitly in the Talmud, if it's a place where there are no witnesses, but I bring witnesses, there happen to be witnesses there, then I don't even have to take an oath. But if I don't have witnesses, then I could take an oath. So that is the big idea here. The big idea is that usually when the Torah says that if you're a borrower, and there are certain cases, and there's one case, but it really applies to all the I think it applies to all the guardians. When the Torah says that there are cases that you don't have to pay, and you take an oath, we're narrowing that definition of the burden of proof. So there's no burden of proof. You just take an oath and you are not liable. But we're saying that's specifically in the cases where we don't expect people to be there. But if we expect people to be there, the borrower would have to bring an oath, would have to bring witnesses that the story happened as he said it did. So that is the big idea in number 2. Now there's a sub point here. The commentaries raise. This is actually interesting. So give me just 1 second. I'll try to pull it up here. Okay, so we're not going to get into the commentary, but I'll just say like this. I'll say, what's the bottom line? How does this help me practically? If you're, I mean, it doesn't help you practically because we don't necessarily follow it in the same way. But if you're going back to the law of the Torah, when I come and ask you, could I borrow your donkey? So part of your calculation should be, do you trust me? Then you'll give it to me. Okay. Part of your calculation should also be, where am I asking to do the work? Because that would affect the burden of proof which you're expecting. So if I tell you, can I please borrow your donkey, and I'm taking it to my 4 acres of land away in the back country in Greenwich where no one's going to see it and I want to use it for my work. Or I say, can I borrow your donkey? I have to ride down Greenwich Avenue because I have to schlep my couch home. That's two different cases. Because agreeing to take your donkey to, or your hammer, or anything, or your bucket, that was the example. But the point here is part of the discussion that you have to have with yourself. In other words, part of the agreement part of the processing that you have to do within yourself. When someone says, "Can I borrow your object?" So on one hand, it's very nice to borrow because the other person has all the liability. So it's nice. So you at least you know that if somewhat you're protected to some degree. But also what we're really taking away from number 2 is think about where are you using this item? Because that would impact the proof that the borrower would have to bring to become to free himself from liability if he claims the one exemption, if he claims that it died while he was doing work. So if I say I'm borrowing it and I'm going to use it in a place where people are present, okay, then you know the owner knows that there's going to be a greater burden of proof required. The borrower is going to have to bring proof that it died while it was doing the work that it was borrowed for. But if you agree for me to take your hammer and use it in my basement, you're basically trusting my oath. So before you give me your hammer to use in my basement, make sure you trust my oath. Or maybe you don't care about the hammer, but assuming you care about the hammer, make sure you trust my oath. So that's just, again, another layer of thinking about, it's not just when you talk about the relationship between the borrower, between the guardian and the owner, it's not just what type of guardian am I giving it to? Am I giving it to a paid or unpaid or a renter or a lender? So that's one way to think about how much liability I want to give away and how much I want to keep for myself. But part of this discussion is also think about the process of the proof. How is this person's claims going to be verified? And if it's a place where people are not present, then an oath would be sufficient. The borrower can get away with just making an oath. If it's a place like this, like the marketplace of Machoza, where we expect people to be present, then the person would not be able to be liable to free himself just by saying, I am going to, I'm taking an oath that it died naturally. Rather, the person would have to bring witnesses, because to claim that I have no witnesses in a place where we know that people are always there, that is not accepted. So that's number 2. That's the second halacha in the first chapter of the laws of borrowers. So comments or questions, welcome. Otherwise, I think we have a few more minutes. I think we can jump into the next discussion. Yeah? So far, so good? Okay. Now comes an interesting question. It's a simple question, but we don't think about it. I don't think we really think about this. So assuming I assuming I break your axe or your animal dies and I'm liable to pay, how much do I pay? What do I mean? So let's say this market value of this object, either animal or object, is $100. Okay, fine. It broke. So what do? Do I give you $100? That's one option. Another option is, one second, while the object broke or while the animal died, the corpse is worth a few dollars. So the corpse is worth $10. So maybe I give you the corpse, I give you $90, right? What happens if you have a dish and the dish breaks, whatever the case is, but the raw material is worth some money. So who gets the broken raw material? If I pay you $100 to replace it, maybe I get the extra. I'll get the raw material, right? Who gets the corpse? The corpse is worth $10. If I pay you $100, looks like I'm losing my internet here. If I pay you $100, then why would I give you the $100 plus the corpse? You get $110. If I pay you $100, and I get the corpse, right? So you have a beautiful silver dish. It broke. Now it's worth a fraction of the price. So do I give you the damaged material and I fill in the worth? Or do I give you the full worth and I keep the damaged material? That's a question. Now, we happen to be learning the laws of borrowing, but the same law actually is addressed in the Torah explicitly, not about a borrower. It's actually explicitly addressed in the Torah about someone who is the laws of torts, the damages. My animal gores your animal. Your animal is dead. Your animal used to be worth $100. Now it's worth $10. The corpse is worth $10. I have to pay. I'm liable to pay. Let's assume I'm liable to pay full, half. Let's say I have to pay. How much do I pay? Do I pay the full value? Or does the person who was damaged keep the corpse and I just pay the difference, the $90? So what's interesting is that the Torah, you tell me what you'd like better, but the Torah addresses it explicitly in the laws of damages. Now the question is, what do we do? Does the law of damages apply also to the law of borrowing? And you'll see there's also theft. So there's different cases. And that's a question. Do we do what we call shamin? Shamin means lashum is to evaluate. When we say shamin, evaluate, what we mean is we evaluate how much the damaged product is worth, the corpse or the broken vessel or whatever the case is. And then I only pay the difference. And the owner keeps the damaged product. Or do I have to just pay you the whole money and I keep the damaged product? And remember, sometimes you would want one, sometimes you want the other. Sometimes there's some sentimental value or whatever the case is. And I think you'd rather have your $100 because if you're getting the damaged product, then you have to go and sell it. And I don't want to get into this right now, but if it's a corpse, you have to sell it right away because the corpse is going to devaluate as every minute passes. Right? If you wait 2 hours in a hot day in Baghdad, the corpse is going to be worth less. So it's actually a burden to be able to, if the case is that you have to, that the owner of the animal gets, we evaluate, so they get only the corpse plus the difference in price because of the damage, then the burden is upon the owner to go and make sure that the corpse does not devaluate further. And if it does, then it's the loss of the owner. If you tell me you don't do this process of shaman, you don't evaluate, so then I get damaged your ox. Your ox used to be worth 100. Now it's dead. It's worth 10. Now I have to pay you 100. And now if I want to save myself $10, I better run to the market and sell this corpse, I guess for animal food or whatever else. But I got to do it right now because otherwise I'm going to lose this $10. I will go down to $5 because the value will depreciate. So this is the discussion that we're going to have. The only question is, should we just go straight to the point or should we go to the background? So I'll go straight to the point. So the bottom line is that both with the damage, when I damage your animal, that's written explicitly in the Torah. Actually, it may not be written. The Torah addresses it. I'm not sure if we could understand. The Torah says that the corpse should be his. We're not sure who is his. It could be there's a debate about that. I retract. but the Torah is certainly addressing it. I'm not sure what the Torah is saying because I think it's vague, but the Torah certainly says, I pay the damage and the corpse belongs to him. So we're addressing the corpse. Who the him is, the payer or the payee? I'm not sure. I mean, I know the halacha, but I'm not sure if there's two opinions. The bottom line is that the halacha, the law follows that if I damage, not me, my animal damages your animal, or I borrowed something, or I'm the guardian and something happens and I'm liable, you do evaluate. Meaning to say, I give you back the corpse and I pay the difference of the price of the damage, sort of helping the person who did the damage, sort of helping the person who, the borrower. But there is a case in the Talmud, now I'm speaking from memory, so I may be wrong, we'll see in a moment. There is a case, if I steal something of yours and then it breaks and I have to return it, no, then I can't give you back the corpse and or the broken pieces and fill in the difference. Because I did a crime, I have to fill you in completely. So in other words, even when my animal gores your animal, yeah, it's my responsibility. I should have protected my animal, but it's not like I did something wrong. It's my animal, right? So it's not as bad as actively going and committing a crime. I didn't commit a crime, right? So if I didn't commit a crime, I'll just fill in the damage. So you get the corpse, you're the owner, you get the corpse, and you get the extra, and and I'll pay the difference of the damage. But if I did something wrong, if I did something criminal, then I can't say, oh, here's your corpse and I'll fill in the $90. No, you did something criminal, you write a check for $100. Right, so you see, but again, this whole discussion in the Talmud is complicated because the Talmud knows about the torts. Then we're not sure about the borrower and we're not sure about the thief. So we bring all the opinions and we ask and we figure it out and we get to the conclusion that I just read. But I think we'll start with, at this point, we'll start with Maimonides. It's more clear, and then maybe we'll go back to the Talmud. We'll see if we want to do that. But we'll certainly, I think we should start with Maimonides in this case. It's more clear, more straightforward. Okay, so we're up to number 3, right? You see on the screen. When a person borrows a utensil from a colleague and it breaks, I borrow a utensil from you. I'm the shomer, I'm the guardian. It broke. I am liable because I'm the borrower. I'm liable in all cases. It didn't break during the work. I'm liable, no problem. How much do I pay? The utensil is evaluated in the same way the utensil, when damages, is evaluated. So that was the word I told you, shamin. We evaluate. That's the conclusion. What does evaluate mean? We evaluate how much the object was worth while it was complete and how much it is worth in the present state. The borrower returns the broken utensil or the injured animal to the owner and makes financial restitution for the damages. Similarly, if the animal dies, he may return the carcass and make restitution for the animal's decrease in value. So that's the law. The law is both by damages. And if my animal damages your animal, or if I borrowed something from you and then it broke or died or whatever the case happens, in those cases, yes, I'm liable to pay, but how much do I have to pay? I don't pay the full amount because the owner keeps the damaged goods. We evaluate the difference in price between the live animal and dead animal or the healthy animal and damaged animal, and I will fill in that damage. That's the halacha, that's the law. Like I said, you have to put it in context. Other cases, we don't say this. In one case, we don't say it is if I thief. If I steal your animal and then it breaks, I have to return the full amount. I'm almost positive. We'll see that in a minute. Okay, if you wanted to see the Talmud, if you wanted to see the discussion, I will raise it, but it's a little bit confusing because Shmuel said a statement and it's not clear. We want to figure out what he said, but we'll read. We'll read it just to get a little flavor. We'll read it. Why not? Why not? And then we'll call it a day. So this will be the last chunk. So here Shmuel says, right? You see this? Shmuel says, the practice of the court is that when an animal or other item is stolen and then it is damaged or dies, the court does not appraise its current value and assign ownership of it to its owner, in order that the perpetrator should have to pay only the difference between its prior value and its current value, neither for the sake of a thief nor for the sake of a robber. Rather, the thief or robber acquires ownership of the carcass or damaged item and compensates the owner for its prior full value. You see what I'm saying? So if I steal, and there's two types of theft there's a thief or a robber. In Hebrew, ganav and gazlan. A thief is someone who does it in quiet, and a gazlan is someone who comes in the open because people are afraid of him. In any case, both those cases, the thief steals my items, the thief steals my TV and breaks it. We're not going to say, oh, the thief gives me back the broken TV and then fills in the amount of a difference in price. No, let the thief keep the broken TV and you pay me the full value. The court appraises the item of carcasses only for damages, as the Gemara explained above. So that's what Shmuel said. But Shmuel said, and I say that they appraise the item or animal even for a borrower who borrowed an item, and while it was in his possession, it became damaged, or who borrowed an animal and while it was in his possession, it died. And Abba, i.e. Rav, concedes to me. So in other words, Shmuel says, the way I'm dividing this, I am saying that for a thief, we don't evaluate. Thief pays the full amount. The damager, my animal damage, it's not me, it's my animal. I don't have to pay the full amount. I only pay the difference between the previous price and the current price. So in other words, the owner gets the carcass and I just fill in the damage. And I say, Shmuel says, the same thing is with the, I say the same thing is with the borrower, that the borrower does not have to pay a full amount. And Rav agrees with me. It's not clear what Rav agrees with. I'm going to skip to the next story. We want to prove Tashma comment here as resolution for the following incident. There was a certain man who borrowed an ox from another and he broke it. Came before Rav. We're trying to figure out who Rav agrees with. He came before Rav to rule if and how much he was liable to pay for it. Rav said to him, go and pay him with a full-fledged axe. We don't evaluate, right? You must compensate the owner for the full value of the axe that you broke, and you get the broken axe. The Gemara concludes from here that the court does not appraise the value for the sake of a borrower. That's what we see. It seems from this story that Rav said the borrower has to pay a full value of new axe, and he can't give the owner back the broken axe. Talmud says, oh no, you stopped the story too early. What happened? Because then Rav's students interjected and they said, that's the law? You sure that's the law? And Rav was silent. So Rav retracted. So here's the next case. The Gemara rejects this. On the contrary, from the fact that Rav Kana and Rav Asi said to Rav on that occasion, is this the halacha? And Rav remained silent. This suggests that he conceded to their opinion that the borrower should not have had to pay a full value of the ox. Accordingly, conclude from here that the court appraises an item's value for the sake of the borrower. And after we do this whole dance, we get to the conclusion that Maimonides gives us, which is when it comes to a borrower, or if my animal causes damage to your animal, I don't have to pay the full amount of the loss. You, the owner, keeps the damaged goods. I just fill in the difference in price. If, however, I do a crime, I steal your object, steal your animal, and then it dies, and then I have to pay back. I'm caught and I have to pay it back. Here, I have to give back the full amount, and I can't just say, oh, you get the carcass and I'll fill in the difference. No. You committed a crime, you write a check for the full amount. So that's the story in short. Thank you for joining. I think we did 2 halachas. So that is 2 sections in Maimonides. We're still in chapter 1. Don't worry, we got plenty to do. But we did number 2 and number 3 today. Thank you for joining. Go ahead, Vicky.
Well, I just wanted to thank you again because I guess we conclude the section and then we're going to have a break. So that's...
Oh, that's correct. Correct. Programming. Next week, we're going to do the JLI in the morning and at night. Please, it's going to be fascinating because it's law, but also the values behind the Jewish law. I'm honestly, you have choice because we believe in choice. You can come in the morning or in the evening, whatever you like, whatever's more convenient. But I encourage you to join because it should be interesting. So thank you for reminding me, Vicky.
Yeah.
But we'll get back to the laws of the borrower. Don't worry, we'll get back to it in 7 weeks.
Yes. So what's fascinating about this whole section, or in the fact that we study in Talmud, is that back then it was, I mean, I'm assuming a lot of people were studying it, and they kind of were forced to think about the relationship, how you have to think about both sides of the story, how to regulate every single detail has to be regulated in your relationship with the other person, and that's by itself it's a very valuable lesson for us today, because we don't because we usually don't, majority of people don't study. And the other, I had a small question about the if you can hear me. Hello. Yeah, I think it got frozen. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, I agree. And but
Oh,
you're
okay,
breaking up
yeah,
a little, but I heard your point.
yeah, but I also
Yeah,
had
you're
a
breaking
question.
up a little, but I did hear your point.
Yeah, I also had a question about the thief. So the only punishment he gets is if he caught, of course. He needs to return the object.
Yeah,
Thank
we
you.
heard. I heard what you said. We got disconnected, but I heard what you said, and I think that's a big problem in this culture. Nobody's.
We're losing you